The Articulate Coven is the original, unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Immortal Universe from AMC and AMC+. Welcome to The Articulate Coven. We're your hosts,
Ashley Wright Eiler
and Joel Sharpton, and this is The Articulate Coven. Ashley!
This episode was so fantastic. I love. Really okay, was. So this is our first episode from someone else's perspective.
Man, and doesn't that open? Well, first of all, we're going to dive right into spoilers, I think, because at this point, you should know whether or not you're watching this show, and don't listen to us before you watch the episode. I'm just going to go there. It was very good.
Yeah, at this point, we can't contain ourselves. Largely. Yeah,
we have some nits to pick, but we need to just get to it. Man, okay, so I think the way that they did this narrative, and there's one other thing that I'll just go ahead and say. You and I talked about it, I think, earlier in the week off air. I just started, like maybe even finished the first chapter of Pandora. I started my reread because that's the next one that we're going to get to after the Witching Hour.
I'm so excited.
It's very exciting. It is very exciting. But I was reminded that all of the books, and I believe, actually, if we go back and check, I think Memnoch is written from this perspective too. All of the books after The Tale of the Body Thief, and definitely after Memnoch, all of those books are dictated to or written in some shorthand and then given to and edited by David Talbot. All the rest of the books in the series are edited by David Talbot, as told to David Talbot, etc., by whichever vampire. It's mostly Lestat. We get a Marius book, we get a Pandora book, we get an Armand book, we get a Vittorio book, etc. But all of it is like epistles to David Talbot, basically. And so knowing, and then at the end of this episode, we get the episode insider from Roland Jones, and he talks about how excited the writing room was to tackle a different voice. I'm going to eat my words, and I'm going to sort of be mad a little bit if it happens that we don't actually get a Lestat series. I think we may just get different seasons or different arcs of this show from all the different vampires' points of view, and then that continues to be accurate that this is an interview with a vampire. It's just that, I mean, maybe the fans are right. There's a lot of speculation from the fandom that Daniel Malloy is going to be David Talbot in the books, and so we get Eric Bogosian for several seasons. They do the Tale of the Body Thief, and Eric Bogosian gets retired, and we get a new younger Daniel in a new young body that gets to be maybe Vampire Daniel at that point. From then on, I don't know whether they're going to do that exactly. But I mean, it would make sense. You could tell it to Daniel as long as he's there.
Yeah, this episode was the first time that I got that vibe that, oh shit, are they going to combine David and Daniel? And this was the first episode that I really got that vibe.
Not just that.
Because it's in my notes from this episode.
For a second, I thought to myself, what if they make Tale of the Body Thief Louis' story? Wouldn't Louis be the one that you could talk into? Couldn't you at least make the argument in the writer's room that it would be more true to Louis' character to be talked into returning to mortal form?
Ooh, I think that is something that would be a bridge too far for a lot of people.
It would certainly make me angry. It would certainly make me angry, at least in theory. But like I've said before, I'm giving this writer's room a lot of rope. Anyway, I saw some potential for where they could be going or what they're going to do in the future that I don't love in theory. Let's see just how it plays out. And maybe we're wrong on our speculations too. But this is the episode to me that broke it open, and it's like, oh, they might do all sorts of things here based on the point of view shift. All right, so let's talk about our leading lady. Our third is finally here in the series, 4 episodes in, more than halfway through this first season, and yet, not just stole the whole show, literally stole perspective and the point of view narration from our leading man, Louis. What do you think about Claudia? What do you think about Bailey Bass?
I think that the casting was brilliant. Her performance is so fun. She was really, everything about Claudia that kind of loved and reveled in being a vampire, because Claudia had a pretty good time, you know. She was very much like Lestat in a lot of ways as far as her habits and her, you know, her proclivities and preferences and things like that. And so I'm really excited that they're showing her and having that enthusiasm of her being like a young teen gives it even more energy than like a little child, a small questioning child. I think that this just puts you in a better place, and we don't have to take as long with her growing up part of the story. It doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be over as many decades when she's already on the brink of that anyway. I don't love the accent, y'all. I don't love it. It makes me kind of uncomfortable, but it did get a little bit better as it went along, or I stopped caring as much. Either way, I'm fine with it.
I think I think it's that second one. Honestly, I thought the same thing too. Ashley, on the rewatch, it bothered me less as I got near the end of the episode. The first time, it had bothered me less. Definitely by the time I was at the end of the episode, the second time, the accent was bothering me less. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I mean, maybe you're just getting used to it. And overall, you do like her portrayal so much. I also think this, and I may go this week sometime and watch some clips and skip back and forth to compare. I think this accent sticks out as particularly bad only in a show that so far has done accents so well.
Yeah,
I think if Bailey's portrayal of Claudia here was in like the third season of True Blood, I think we would think, she's at least as good as half the cast
absolutely.
and better than
Absolutely.
most of them.
100%. I totally agree with that. Like, and I do think that part of it is that she's just really charming. Like her portrayal, her performance is so charming in a weird way that you just stop caring, you stop minding as much. And I'm sure they have people working with her on set, and I can only expect that that's going to get better as the season goes on.
Well, and you would imagine definitely between seasons, theoretically, the transition. She spent a lot of time in character. They've perhaps honed in on exactly what they want from her. Here's the other thing, though, that just occurred to me, and this literally popped into my head as you were saying that. I wonder if part of it is literally direction. We just talked about this whole point of view shift and the change in tone as we hear from Claudia's words in the diaries versus Louis as reported to Daniel. Um, Maybe she was even instructed, hey, look, Claudia's life is like a melodrama. Maybe it's about literally that for Claudia, this is a different show. Lestat is in this period European drama. Louis is in a jazz epic, and Claudia is in, a 1940s soap opera sort of thing. Kind of, I don't know, but it's a lot. It's a lot. She's a lot. There's no doubt of that. And everybody is in on that. That is absolutely true to the book portrayal of Claudia. Claudia is
A lot.
a killing machine yeah, she's a lot. I do particularly love this sort of explanation, or I don't know what you want to call it. They make reference to being 14 years old. Claudia's 14 years old when she's turned in the series. She's constantly got the appetite and metabolism of a 14-year-old. And having a 14-year-old.
Yeah, like a teen that you can't keep full of food.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old boy myself. They are literally bottomless pits. They can eat everything in the house, and then they still go, well, do we have any of X or Y or Z? No, friend, there is no more. You've got to not gorge yourself.
You've eaten it
Yeah,
all.
you ate a man twice your size. So I loved her ferocity, and I like the idea that it's not just because she's necessarily evil or mal-made. She's literally stuck with this stew of hormones and her body in a state of change, except it's going to be that way eternally.
Well, and right off the bat, she's experiencing so many new things for the very first time. She's in that room in their house. She thinks she's in heaven, because she's never been in a
Mm.
room that nice. And so she's experiencing all of these crazy heightened things that, especially as a young teen, you would be super cranked about. Like, holy shit, I'm rich now. I've got a pretty outfit to wear. Oh my God, we get to go do X, Y, and Z. Like we've got a car. I'm seeing these two men in love for the first time. They got a funny way of being nice to each other. Like she's just seeing so many things, so many new things for the first time. And I was excited to kind of go through that with her.
I loved, 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 and I think this is done on purpose. I'm gonna hope that it's done on purpose. If it's not, it's a happy accident. I love the portrayals of Louis and Lestat in this episode as seen through the eyes of Claudia. Louis
Yes.
is more kind, more human, more personable, more straightforward and forthright than he's ever been in this series so far. He is, as someone said in the comments on our Facebook group, he's the most Louis that he's ever been in this episode. And it occurred to me, really, the character of Louis in the books is only seen in the reflection of his love for Claudia and her love for him, and then Lestat's love for him. We sort of get glimpses of it through Armand too, but the character of Louis himself is sort of a cipher. He's that Eeyore of vampires that we've referred to in the past. Here in the series, he's been given so much more agency and charisma and joie de vivre, so to speak.
Right.
But here with Claudia, we see a lot of the real honest to God book Louis. And it's really nice to see. Likewise, this Lestat is more cruel, more simple. He's less sympathetic and less charismatic here. He's rude in a way that
He's right off the bat so jealous.
yeah, well, not just jealous, but like, again, callous in a way that he's not been. We've talked about how he misreads social cues, right? And he doesn't always do the right thing. But that's not what we see here. It seems to be purposeful. He twists the knife on Louis when Louis brings Claudia to be turned. He twists the knife on Claudia again and again in this episode. And to me, that is not actually what happened. It's that this Claudia has not resolved her feelings about Lestat in the way that this Louis clearly has.
Right. And we're looking at too, like I feel like in this episode, like what you kind of touched on is that we're seeing these versions of these characters as Claudia saw them. We're seeing the version of them that is in her diaries. So everything that we saw in this episode that was through her, narration, that's all her perspective. So it's really cool to see the nuance and the changes of the performances. I love that they took the time to do that because it would have been so easy to just not, but to kind of amp up those qualities, and to do it in such a specific and purposeful way, I think is just awesome. And I think it probably should kind of give us a heads up on what we can expect in future episodes, future seasons. No matter what direction we go in, these episodes, we should expect to see these nuanced changes in these performances as we go through, depending on the perspective we're seeing.
Yes, yes, I absolutely agree. Couple of things before we move too far into the episode. I loved, loved, loved the attack on the cop in City Park. First of all,
Oh,
it's a
so
beautiful
great.
location. It was used very famously in with the mysterious case of Benjamin Button, and that the name of that movie, the Brad Pitt is a baby thing.
Yes.
There's a really good scene that's set in City Park there, in that same. I guess it's kind of like a Greek, building, whatever ruin looking thing in the middle of the park there. It's too big for a gazebo. I don't know what you would call that. Anyway, that location
Yeah.
is used in a handful of movies, and it rings very New Orleans to me. Obviously there are clips of that attack in the trailers that we had seen before. I had not recognized it as City Park though, so that was cool. The other thing I liked early there, and we've already talked about the scene between Louis and Claudia in the Bayou a little bit, but
Oh,
I loved the discussion about their romance, about Lestat and Louis's relationship. What's it
yeah.
like to love a man? And Louis first of all, doesn't dismiss her question, right? It doesn't come out of left field for her. She doesn't have any frame of reference for it. And they hadn't talked about it before. Okay, well, what is it like to love a man? And then he goes to describe it. It's like love, isn't it? It's just like love.
It's the same thing.
That's simple, really, when it comes down to it. Yeah, it's the same thing. I thought that was really beautiful. And also just like genuinely showed the connection that the two of them have. Now, Lestat and Claudia get a scene that is also about connection and bonding, but it's a very different kind of scene later in the episode. But I did love that scene of them in the bayou, and it makes me think, again, it makes it ring true that these characters have the connection that we see for them in the novels, and the way you see later in the episode that Claudia still impacts Louis a great deal. You see why, I guess, in that scene in the bayou in particular.
Yeah, it definitely is taking the time to show how close they are. The fact that she feels comfortable enough to ask him some of these questions, I think, is also, indicative of their closeness and the importance of that relationship. She sees him with such softness. He's always so like smiling and gentle with her, kind of, and it's just really, really nice to see her through his eyes. Wait, backwards. It's really nice to see him through her eyes.
Yes, yeah, no, I knew what you meant. Well, but I feel like we get to see her through his eyes as well, and with that scene between Louis and Daniel later. When Louis finally awakes because Mr. Point de Lac is resting today. Which, by the way, let's talk about the fact I thought for a little while that we might not get any of Louis in the modern day in this episode, which I thought was going to be, pretty daring of them. They don't do that. We get a couple of scenes at the end with Louis and Daniel speaking directly, but before that, we get a lot. We get a big dose of Rashid.
Yes.
What do you think's going on? What do you think's going on with Ashley? I mean, with Rashid, Ashley.
We were kind of talking offline about it, and I think obviously he really stays out of the sun, doesn't he? He's really careful about not getting into the sun.
I had not considered it at all in previous episodes, but I really want to go back now and watch.
I do too, and see if that holds up.
Yes. Does he never go into the sun? The other thing I noticed in this episode, and again, I need to go back and check. I think he was wearing gloves every single time he appeared. Has he worn gloves in every episode so far? If so,
I don't know. We're gonna have to go and give this the Sixth Sense treatment. Go back and see if that shit holds up.
Right. We're not going to talk about the specifics until our Easter egg section at the end, in case you haven't read any of the books and you don't want to be spoiled. But there is a link in the show notes to a person on Twitter at _Savage Garden. A Library of Confusion is their handle. Anyway. They found a Rashid character in the Alphabetary, which is like the encyclopedia of vampires that Anne's assistant Beckett wrote several years ago. I have a copy of that book. Anyway, the link to that is going to be in the show notes if you want to go and check it out, and we're going to talk about it a little bit in the Easter egg section of this episode. But just from what we know in this episode, I think very much we are meant to be speculating about him. We're meant to be wondering what his deal is. Daniel even types into his computer after he and Rashid have the interaction, what's his end game? Meaning, what is Rashid's end game? It was under like the Rashid section. So interesting stuff going on with him. I also want to call out the fact that Daniel specifically references, hey, when he talks about Louis, he says Mr. Point de Lac, but he also says he serves a god. This episode, Rashid also referred to electronic mail inbox or something like that. Very antiquated language. The combination of that and the fact that he didn't step out onto the balcony very much has us questioning, is he a vampire? And if so, exactly what part does he play? Who is it that he's serving? All of those questions
does
are
he
popping up
belong?
more and more for everybody. Yeah, exactly. To whom does he belong? That is the question there. But I do love the return of Louis, though, and the interaction that they have. The very first thing is he references her writing. Her writing is quite good. Guess what? because it came from the lady herself, most of it. A ton of Claudia's narration in this is directly from the Claudia diary sections of Queen of the Damned that Anne wrote herself. So that was snuck into the episode, I think.
I have to say, Claudia's diaries were, once I knew that those existed in this world, I was so like thirsty to get to read them. You know what I mean? Like that's some serious content that I wanted to know how this happened from her perspective so much. I was like really dying for it because I loved that character so much in Interview when I read it the first time in particular. And the fact that all of her diaries were laid out there and he could just pick each one up and read sections of it. It was so crazy to me. I was like, I want to sit in that room and read all those books, please.
Well, I love that Rashid he says, "We suggest you start on the left," and then leaves the room. Daniel immediately goes all the way to the right
Right.
and opens the diary, which, by the way, my eyes were not good enough. But I got Kelly to double check on my iPad, and she says the date for that last diary when they open it, and the words at the top are "So we've arrived in Paris," or "At last we've arrived in Paris," something like that. It's 1945, which confirms for us, Ashley, we're getting World War II vampires in season 2.
Yes. Well, there's that section where he reads about the the soldiers, their blood being really, what was it, sour or bitter or something.
Yeah, the POWs. She talks about the
Yeah.
POW camp. So again, like I mean, who knows how they're going to play this out? But they could literally have Louis and Claudia somehow like caught up in the wave of the American soldiers as they're liberating the concentration camps and marching through, Europe after Hitler's defeat, effectively. Anyway, there's a lot of really interesting ways they could go with that, and we get a confirmation there on sort of like our when does this
Our
relationship
timeline. Yeah, we
change?
get,
Yeah, when does this relationship change, and when did they go to Europe?
and how much time has passed? How much I mean, I think we always figured we see roughly the same passage of time with the whole thing, but we're definitely on a sped up timeline with the.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, so, and we get another reference to that, by the way. Daniel, when Louis comes back in, he says, "How far did you make it?" And Daniel says, 1923-ish, Claudia's date with Charlie. And, Louis is like, "Oh, yes." And
That was a rough
so
night.
what that means is, boy, wasn't it though? And obviously like a turning point for their relationship too. But if you do the math there, so Louis was turned in 1910, and there were about 6 or 7 years between him being turned and them buying or excuse me, the end of that sequence of him running the fancy brothel and everything, and the fires. That's about 7 years in. So then Claudia, at the point of her date with Charlie, has been with them for 6 years. So she would be 20 years old in her mind, at least, at that point.
Yeah, bless her heart.
Which also means that by the time they get to Europe in 1945, that throuple would have been together for another, what is that, 12 years at that point. So,
Hmm.
so effectively, Charlie marks the halfway point for their relationship, that family there in New Orleans, it seems like.
And we're roughly halfway through our season, so I think that might
Kind
be
of makes
about where we
sense.
get through. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So what did you think about Charlie and the way that relationship plays out? Very different. Obviously, that character doesn't exist in the novels, and this relationship doesn't really exist as Claudia in the books is, I think, 4 or 5 supposed to be. In the movie, she was
Right.
portrayed as 12.
Yeah, I was heartbroken for her. Like, I was so heartbroken for her because this is like the first, when she even says it, this is like the only boy I'll ever get to love like this, and I was just really heartbroken for her. She, something she had of her own, and I mean, of course, she's the one that f's it up, but um, oh, it was just heartbreaking. She kills them on accident while they're, having romantic time in the back of the carriage, and then Lestat makes her burn him and watch. It was the worst.
Oh,
Like, I think we all had bad dates in high school and had to deal with parents that were kind of rough, but shit, I don't think anyone's dad watch them made them burn their boyfriend and watch.
well, you know what it reminded me of slightly? It reminded me of like the dad that catches you smoking, and so he makes you smoke the whole pack at a
Yeah.
sitting.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, only to
but
this
again,
degree
that
because
moment
this is the
where
world we're in.
right. But when he's holding her there again, that especially was the moment that to me was like, oh, this is so not like the. I mean, it's not. Lestat has done some terrible things in the books, right? So if you go through and you cherry pick this moment or that moment, Lestat is capable of any atrocity effectively. But but that moment seemed very out of character for me based on what we've seen so far in the TV series. And again, that's a moment where I'm like, I think that's Claudia's version of exactly
I
what happened.
do,
Maybe
but
he
I
did hold her there.
I think he did it because I think he did it probably to teach her a lesson about what is going to happen again and again and again if you continue to try to have relationships with humans. I think he's just trying to, in his stupid, bad parent way, trying to like show her, like, look how bad this can be because, and you don't want to do this again. Like trying to protect her in the most fucked up way.
Well, how many times in the books has Lestat had a relationship with a human that ended up in
Right.
either the human dying or the human becoming turned as a vampire?
Or going
I mean,
absolutely fucking
or
crazy.
going
Like, I
mad.
mean,
That's right. That's right. Going mad. He's sent a few of them to the nut house. I forgot. That's
he
absolutely
leaves
true.
destruction in his wake, and he knows he does when it comes to his relationships with humans. And perhaps he's just trying to, very early in her vampiric life, nip that in the bud for her so she doesn't have to go through that like he has had to.
So one of the things in this episode, and I sort of thought maybe they would only do it the once in the series, and then I wouldn't have to pick the nit, so to speak. But they did it again here. Lestat takes Claudia out to Lover's Lane. Let's talk about that scene a little bit. But when he first gets there, first of all, he lets her drive, which I thought was lovely. Yes, teach the
So
kid how to
fun.
drive. I thought that was really cool. But they get there, and he again refers to humans as meat. He says the meat refer to this as a lover's lane,
Right.
and I've seen this called out by other fans before too. Lestat at this point in his story is only killing the evildoer. In the books, he is not. He is occasionally callous with the way that he kills them, as Louis lays out earlier in this episode. He likes to toy with his food sometimes. But what we find is, in the broader tale anyway, that the people that Lestat is killing are really bad people. They're people that he has hunted and knows what they're capable of and what they've done, and he's not doing it callously. He feels still that he's serving the greater good by ridding these people, of the earth. And yet here he calls them meat. I wonder, is this just about the unreliable narrator thing? Is it that this Lestat is more cruel, or are they hinting at, again, there's 150 years for this Lestat that basically doesn't happen in the books, or it happens later, after he's met Louis and everything. They're not
Right.
this far apart in age as they are in the TV series. What could have happened to Lestat before he comes to America? I mean, is there a reason that we're sort of like hinting towards, do you think, that this Lestat has sort of given up on humanity, perhaps?
Or
Is
maybe
that what
he's not
they're
there
is that
yet.
what they're getting at?
Or maybe he's not there yet. Like at the place where he's like, I'm gonna just kill the evildoer. Maybe he's not
Oh,
gotten to that point
so
yet.
you say maybe instead of like a Marius thing, effectively in the novels, that's Marius's explanation to him, like, hey, how do you last the centuries? One of the ways is you don't give yourself a guilty conscience because you only eat bad people, and that makes this whole thing go down easier. You're saying in the series maybe that's Lestat gets that from Louis, not beforehand. That would be an interesting
Right. Or
twist, I
maybe
suppose. And also, it might deepen the connection for Lestat in that, like, hey, you've given me the answer to the centuries to stop some of the hollowness, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like I serve a purpose now, and he got that from Louis. I wouldn't hate that, I suppose.
Yeah, and then the other thing I think that if we're, it's a nit to pick, obviously, but it's a nitpick that also existed in the '94 film as well. Lestat wasn't
Mm.
just killing the evildoer in that movie.
Well, but he says he does, though. At some point, Lestat, Tom Cruise's Lestat makes reference to. Now I can't remember the line. I saw somebody talk. I saw somebody talk about this week, though, that it's sort of thrown a hat toss, but then it wasn't really followed through in the movie. It's one of those things.
Right. It doesn't seem
Um,
like that's the truth. I feel like that's a
yeah, it's
lie.
not consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Several times now in this series, there's been a reference to not drinking dead blood.
Yes.
This is a thing in the novels, especially the first couple. But as the series goes on and kind of loses the thread on that particular, it's not such a big deal if you drink dead blood later on. But in the movie version, especially, and I think this is true in Interview with the Vampire, the novel. No, in the novel, the boys are drugged. There are
Drugged.
two
Yeah.
boys offered to Lestat, right? In the novel, that's how Claudia gets him to sort of get him loopy, and they're already dead. She says they're sleeping, and they're already dead in the movie. That's why he's sort of weakened, and she's able to attack him. I have thought that's what they were working towards here with these references, but in this episode in particular, when Claudia has killed Charlie, she leans back, sort of satiated, and she says, and I turn the captions on to make sure, I feel loose.
Yeah.
Now they were necking. I don't think they were actually having sex. I think because Charlie's even telling her like you're very forward and slow down a little bit. Wait for me. I don't think they were having sex. But what does she mean there? Does she just mean that she felt? Is she drunk there because she's been drinking his blood after he died?
I don't think so. I think it's more of just like she didn't realize she was drinking his blood. I
Mm.
honestly think that was like that she was so caught up in the moment and caught up in her passion. And it's that thing we've discussed before that like passion for these vampires, a lot of that has to do with the blood and not necessarily the naughty parts. And so in this moment she gets caught up in her passion and her excitement, and she drains him and has no idea that that's what she's done until she sees him.
Mm.
But you
That
could totally be right that she went a little too far because he says you didn't have to kill him.
Well, it just occurred to me that okay, so the episode as the episode ends, she's had to burn Charlie, and we get the final scene there with Louis and Daniel, and then it goes back to Claudia's words as Daniel begins to read again, and Claudia's having a manic episode in her coffin effectively after this moment as Louis and Lestat are fighting over her coffin, it sounds like, or just outside the room. And I don't know, it occurred to me as like one of those scenes in movies where you see a character take drugs and then have a traumatic experience. I wondered
Oh yeah.
if we weren't sort of meant to think one of the reasons why this all went so far and why she maybe has a turn after this episode and things perhaps. Well, I mean, she says it even in the text. She says, we got a phone call and the easy times ended or the happy times ended or whatever.
Right.
Um, maybe that is because literally like she's out of her gourd. She's been sort of drugged or duped or something by or doped or something by this dead blood. Anyway, I wondered if that was what they were hinting towards. They didn't say it expressly. It's not referenced. It might not come up again. And there's been a few things about vampiric powers and vampiric lore that they've played a little fast and loose with so far in the series. So we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. But I just had that thought. I wonder if she wasn't effectively drunk or drugged for the entire last scene of the episode, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that, but to me, it felt like that. I am so stuck. I am like it just a real like manic, lost, frightened, horrified, accepting, denying, like just it felt like a real like early 20s meltdown. but also with the added hell of being stuck in a 14-year-old's body with your same 14-year-old hormones while you're mentally and emotionally a 20-year-old. That is some fucked up
Yes.
shit. Like that's enough.
Yes.
That's enough
Well,
to make me want to get into a coffin and throw a fit, frankly. You know, like the idea of having to relive all that shit would be a nightmare. Um, oh, one of the things
or
I
the
loved was her getting
self-harm.
her own bedroom. I know that that's totally off topic right now, but I was like, get that girl her own bedroom so she doesn't have to listen to her dad's screw in the next coffin.
Dude, do you know how bad I felt in that moment watching Claudia's face in that coffin for every time that I've like we've gone camping and I've screwed in a tent when my kids are in the next tent, for instance. I'm like, man, have I scarred my children? Like, our house isn't that big,
Are they writing
Like,
in their journals in bed?
exactly, exactly. I did have that moment. I've never had to look at any of their faces, obviously, while it was happening. So that was a moment for me as a parent. But yes, no, I love that moment when she gets her own room. The moment at the end of the episode, and I didn't think about this the first time that I watched it, but on rewatch, the moment when she self harms, she puts her arm into the sunlight. Which, by the way, I was not a big fan of the idea of these sunlights. The keyhole. What are those called? Skylights. I was not a big fan
Right.
of the skylights when the series started. They've played so well though in the series, and I really actually like how they work. I'm hopeful that that kind of continues, honestly. But that moment when she puts her arm into the sunlight, it occurred to me that it was very similar in tone and feel and the way that it was played, even to the moment in the '94 movie when Claudia cuts her hair off. She has this
Absolutely.
realization that she's never going to have a woman's body. That's the moment in the movie. She sees a beautiful woman and she says, "When will I have breasts like those?" And Tom says, "Never, my dear. You're always going to be this." And she just freaks the fuck out. And so she runs into her bedroom. She's yelling and screaming. She runs into her bedroom. She cuts off all her hair and then immediately it regrows because that's the way it did in the movies. That's not the way that it works in the books. But then fine, that was the way they wanted to play it. Here, you get that same moment. That's a moment of self-harm. I mean, that's every
Yeah,
time you see that in a
absolutely.
movie, somebody chops off all their hair, it's effectively a cry for help, and often right before they try to commit suicide or something. This is that for Claudia. She's having that
Yeah.
moment where I'm not in control of anything. I can't change this body. I'm locked in it like a prison. I'm locked with these two idiots who I love and hate in equal degrees. And well, I can control this, can I? I'll burn the shit out of my arm, and what will they say about it? They're going to hate it. You know, it's
Yeah.
like getting a
It's
tattoo, except worse.
well, and it's just very, and it's I think self-harm is something that we've really started talking about in the past, 10, 15 years a lot more. You know, when you have that need to harm yourself so that you feel in control of something or that you can feel something if you've
Mm,
dissociated really hard, it's just I think that I'm really glad that I mean I'm not glad that our Claudia is having to go through this, but it's nice to see things like that being portrayed in a pretty honest way, even in this very kind of fictitious world that we're dealing with here.
yes, it's a perfect example again of how the writers are taking the opportunity of vampirism and these supernatural themes to discuss real world issues and real world concerns and like which is the whole point of the horror genre, right? And the fantasy genre. It's about being able to explore our own problems and issues and concerns and thoughts and queries at a remove, so to speak. Well, it's not about the
Right.
rent; it's about getting the ring to Mount Doom.
Absolutely. And you can kind of confront your own fears and see them resolved in a way, good, bad, or ugly in genre films and genre shows and things like that. I think that's why we're so drawn to them. I think that's one of the reasons why true crime has become such a big thing. It's like you can kind of face your fears to a certain degree.
I wonder if next episode is also going to be from Claudia's diaries, or if it's largely going to be a return to Louis as narrator
Kind
and
of
the,
filling in the
the interview
gaps.
style that we've. Yeah,
Oh, we haven't talked about Louis' mama.
Oh no, yes, very good point. That was the impetus for the end of the Happy Nights. I forgot. Yes. Um,
Right.
so Ray Dawn Chong has performed her last as Mama Dulac.
R.I.P.
She
Mama.
passes away. Indeed, indeed, excellent performance, and glad to have had her on the show. So that causes Louis and his family, his young family, to attend the funeral services, or excuse me, the wake actually, because the funeral is going to be during the day, and Louis can't make it, as he tells Levy
He has plans.
and Grace. Yeah, he can't make it. I thought the scene was really good. I also love the fact that Louis did not like enter and immediately say hello to Grace at all. It was Claudia that got the introduction first, and there's this weird spooky girl standing over the body that Grace and Levy approach and wonder
Yeah.
where this little girl came from. Who your mama and daddy?
Oh, I just loved at the end of the scene where when when Lestat pops up with her and it's like Claudia has expressed a desire to go home, and she says the smell is awful. I'm just thinking about dead bodies in New Orleans in the damn summertime with no air conditioning. Jesus Christ.
Right? Oh my goodness. Yeah, you know it was ripe in there. I mean, that's the
Well,
reason
especially
why
if you're a
flowers at
vampire, my
funeral.
God.
Oh yeah,
But I,
no, for sure. Especially when you can't drink from the dead, right? So they probably literally like disgust them. You would imagine.
Right. It's hard to see this very kind of angry, harsh side of Louis, the way he behaves with Grace now. He brings up, you remember what I did to that door. What they want is for him to sign over his side of the house to them, or his half of their mother's estate. And it's so strange to me that he's like, he won't just do it. You have so much money, you don't need that. Why would you not just do that for them? It's kind of a hard side of him. And I get that he's angry. I get that there's all that.
Well, not just that, but you also have to you have to remember the time period and the fact that he's executor of his father's estate, right? So his mother would have had nothing. Grace has nothing. Louis is in control of all of the Point du Lac money, all of the properties, et cetera, et cetera. So Mama dies. Grace and Levy might be out on the street, I think, is the worry that is there. Like if Louis wanted to say, this is my property and you've made it clear that I'm not welcome here, so guess what? You're not welcome there actually because
Go
it's
on,
mine. I
get.
think that was a little bit of, yeah, I think that was a little bit of concern that Louis was going to edge them out completely, whereas, and Grace, I think, makes a good argument. Louis has clearly not had anything to do with the family since that
Right.
moment where he blew the doors down, right? He came home to pay his respects to his mother. Maybe he came home a little bit to rub it in his sister's face that he's still doing fine, and in fact has this daughter that he knew would freak her the F out.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like I think there was a little bit of like, well, as someone who occasionally has a contentious relationship with his siblings, I can understand you want to throw an elbow once in a while. And I think that's what that was. However, as he walks away, what does he say? I'll sign the papers.
Right,
I'll have
right.
him write the papers up. Like he's going to give her due, and I think largely he'll divest himself of the Point du Lac estate. But I think part of the reason he held on to it all this time is because he refused to remove himself from his human life.
Yeah.
Now, if we want to get a little glimpse into next week, I think the trailer for next week implies the answer to our previous question. What is the plantation moment that ends all of this? How is Louis really driven from public life? I think Claudia might be the reason why they're both driven from public life in New Orleans, as we sort of get a glimpse of in the trailer there. And I think this is that moment where Louis, honestly, even pre all of the things turning south with Charlie and Claudia's, sort of meltdown, I think Louis feels it right here. That's the reason he's resigned as he walks away. He does make a threat effectively to Grace. You measure yourself. Don't look. I am still a vampire. Don't talk to me like that.
Yeah.
But also, I'm your brother. I love you. I'm going to give you the house. Bye. And I honestly would be surprised if we see Grace again. I don't think that. I think that was the end of it.
I would too. I'd be very, very surprised. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't looked at IMDb to see how many episodes she's credited in, but I would guess the same
Yeah, me
thing.
neither.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I can't. I don't think that there's more to mine there from that relationship.
Yeah, I think he's effectively with this saying he's going to sign the papers. He's letting go of that side of himself. He's committed to his new family now, his partner, his daughter, and now he's ready to let go of the old.
Yes, precisely. All right, Ashley, let's move with that since we've already started talking about the trailer. Let's move into the Easter egg section. If you don't want to know any speculation from us about, based on our knowledge of the books, what might be coming, or some things that have come up in previous episodes or this episode that are going to be hinted about, then now is your time to bounce out. Enjoy episode 5, and we'll see you again next week. For those that
Absolutely.
are interested in a little speculation, let's go into it. First and foremost, I saw this on Twitter earlier in the week, and I didn't retain the link. I apologize. Someone did the math on the comment from Lestat to Louis. In episode 3, Lestat says, we'll be together 10,000 nights. 100,000. Someone did the math. 10,000 nights is 27 years. 1911 to 1938. What's going to happen in 1938, Louis? What's going to happen in 1938, Lestat? 10,000 nights might be prophetic, is all I'm saying.
That's awesome.
Particularly if you do the math on Claudia's diaries, right? If they're in Paris by 1945, especially if we're going to actually get some of the travels into Eastern Europe and other places, which I hope we do in season 2, then 38 might be when this all goes south for real. So that will be very, very interesting. We already mentioned the 1945 reference from the diaries, so confirmation of the POWs reference as well. Confirmation on World War II vampires. Here's another reference from our Facebook group. Laura Phillips in the Facebook group said, did anyone see that AMC has made a personal website and a LinkedIn page for Daniel Malloy?
I
might be reading too much into this. I'd seen this too. She says, I might be reading too much into this, but I noticed that his work history starts in 1981, while his first interview with Louis was in 1973. I'm wondering if those missing years might mean that we're going to get part of his story from the books that we assumed had been cut because they had aged up the character. What if he spent that decade, those lost 8 years, as Armand's plaything?
Oh, my goodness. I hope so. Number one, I always love when any production goes this far to like create a fake website for you to go to, or a phone number that you call that works. I love that shit so much. I can't help it. I just think it's so much fun, and I'm so glad that they've done it for Daniel. I think it's hilarious. But also I love that the clues it gives us, obviously, when you know more, when you have, more knowledge, obviously there's extra tricks and treats in there for you. But I think that it's fun for absolutely anybody to get to see those things.
So there was one other thing that I think is relevant here that kind of leaked and went out this week. There is a YouTube clip from the actor who will be playing, and we referenced this earlier, there is a young Daniel coming this season, some sort of flashback. The actor who is playing young Daniel, which, by the way, looks like Eric Bogosian's clone. It is insane how much they look alike. But there's a clip from his audition tape that he sent for this role as young Daniel. The audio is really bad, and the video is pretty grainy quality. And if you can make out the audio, his dialogue, and the dialogue from the scene partner that's testing him there in the audition or whatever, I think it's very spoilery, so I didn't want to link to it directly. But if you're interested, if you just go to Twitter and Google young Daniel Malloy, or if you go to YouTube and search for this actor's name, I believe it'll probably come up then. But it makes me think that we are going to get this story. And I do think there is a further connection in Daniel's past that's going to be played out eventually. The other thing that led me even more to believe this way, I happened to set my aunt up this weekend with AMC Plus so that she could watch the episodes early. For her. It turns out, by the way, Ashley, we had talked previously, I was going to get my aunt to explain to us what had been cut for the cable versions. She's not going to be helpful to us because she hasn't seen it yet on cable. For some reason, her DVR didn't record it, so she hasn't seen anything yet until last night. I set her up, and so she was going to watch the first episode.
Well, good. She deserves the good stuff, Joel. She deserves the good stuff.
Well, that's what I told her.
The uncut shit.
That's what I told her, exactly. Yes, that's right. The real uncut vampire shit. So I set it up for her and I said, hey, I want to. If you got a minute, let's just watch this for a second. And I showed her just the intro until Louis sort of giggles because he's been asked, how long have you been dead? And, he chuckles and it flashes to 1910 Louisiana, New Orleans. And that's where we stopped. And so she just saw that intro. But it occurred to me for the first time, and now that was the third time or the fourth time that I've seen the very beginning of that first episode. But as Louis, we're getting his letter sort of read aloud by him as we see Daniel make his way to Dubai. Louis there says, I've followed your achievements with, much interest, both those professional and personally redemptive. And I think that just rolled over me completely the first time. Maybe I thought it was a reference perhaps to his drug use.
Right.
I wonder if that is not a reference to the relationship with Armand kind of ruining his life. And listen, here's a thing it's not my story to tell, so we're not going to talk about specifics. But Ashley, you and I know at least one person in common who led a very open gay lifestyle as a young man, had an incredibly intense and very bad breakup, and lived the rest of their life as a closeted man in a smaller community, living sort of a very different lifestyle. I knew a different person that had that exact same story happen to them that was from my hometown. That a person that I grew up working with in the theater world. Anyway, I'm saying it's not unheard of for a person to have a life-altering relationship and for them to spend the next several decades trying to find a resolution for that by sort of denying who they are.
Yeah.
And I wonder if if he's like, well, the only, and what Louis was referring there was maybe the birth of his children, the fact that Daniel had children, showing he's moved on, he's got relationships, he's trying to have a life, Anyway, I just wonder, all of that soup was in my head this week. I'd seen young Daniel. There's several references in this episode that sort of make me think there's more to this. And then having seen that, watching it with my aunt, I think we're going to get young Daniel's story, maybe even a lot of it. Maybe we're going to get Armand episodes next season while we're meeting Armand I don't know how that would work exactly. Anyway, I think there's more to it, and I think we're going to get that story. So the people who, including me, who worried if Daniel was being straight washed, I don't think he is.
I hope so, because I love this character. Yeah. And that definitely would kind of explain the direction that they've gone in with the character, and that does make sense, especially considering how fucked up his relationship with Armand was. I mean,
you want to talk about an abusive relationship. You want to talk about a misbalanced, fundamentally toxic relationship. Daniel and Armand. And I know a lot of people ship them sort of, but like, that's effed up, man. That is messed up in a big way.
Yeah, and I think their relationship grows and changes obviously over time, just like all of our characters do, because they're alive for centuries. But I think that it's just that was really hard pill for me to swallow with Armand. I loved Armand in the first couple of books, and then that happened, and I was like, oh, I don't like this at all. Like, I was really put off by it. That was one of the more despicable things I think Armand has done to anyone.
And that list is long, honey.
That list is real long. I love someone in our group was like, oh, I thought this might be the year I could read Armand would not hate his guts. And it's not. I feel the same way sometimes. But I love to hate him and I hate to love him. Oh.
Indeed. All right, let's get to our Rashid discussion. We mentioned this a little bit in the episode proper, but now that we're in Easter eggs, so the alphabetary reference, if you go and look up Rashid in the alphabetary from Beckett, so the vampire Eudoxia was hundreds of years old before she meets the young Rashid shortly after the founding of Constantinople. So Rashid is 1,000 years old plus, a very, very old vampire in the books. Um, Eudoxia turns Rashid into a vampire, and then she welcomes him into her home full of vampire slaves. The two of them have a fairly long life. There's another fledgling named Asper. The three of them are kind of the trio. They have a whole story together. All of these vampires appear in the novel Blood and Gold, which is Marius's story from his own perspective, so to speak. But that trio, Eudoxia, Asphar, and Rashid, they eventually discover that Marius has the mother and father, Akasha and Inkle. And Eudoxia had drank from Akasha previously. She approaches Marius to let her do so again. He says no. And they're like, well, fuck this dude. We'll just take him. Except Marius is a real badass from the novels. I don't know if you're aware of this. And so he ends up killing Rashid, and he burns him completely to ashes with the fire gift in the books. So that's the only place where Rashid appears in the novels. I
I
think
do
that
remember that now.
the
Now that you're reading that, I totally remember that now.
right.
Wow.
Well, and it's one of those things that's, I mean, a lot of shit happens in Marius's story. It's a very long story, right? So and to me, there are more interesting characters.
Well, and you get his story in like three different books too, like we
Right. Yeah. You get him telling it to Lestat, and then you get him telling it to Armand, and then you get him telling it to, theoretically to David. But anyway, I wonder if, first of all, I think it absolutely is true that Rashid's a vampire in the series. I think it is very likely that he's tied to Akasha and Inkle, probably tied to Marius as well. Whether that means this is Armand's place or whether this is Marius's place, is this tower in Dubai where they're keeping Akasha and Inkle still? Is this post Queen of the Damned? Is it pre Queen of the Damned? I don't know. But I
we
think
don't
that those
know.
things are definitely connected. I think those things are
Yeah.
definitely connected. I think this is brilliant, though, on the part of the showrunners, in that here's an example of a very minor character from the books, only appears in one book, one of the lesser known ones, and yet they can give him a broader story that is still, connected to his character in the novels, or maybe even very true to his character in the novels, if not true to his actual storyline in the novels. And yet also keep us as viewers largely in the dark unless we go and do, some super sleuthing.
Right. Or even if it's just a like we're using this name to let you know that we're in the know. We know these characters, we know these stories, we've done our research. So here's a little nugget, even if it's never really, fully fleshed out, then here's this little delicious nugget for you to enjoy. But I agree, it seems unlikely that they just did it on a happy accident.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I don't think this is just a coincidence. They clearly at least picked the name because of the minor character in the novels, which makes me think probably his portrayal here is going to have something to do with those who must be kept, which is very exciting to me because again, that is that whole like the history of the vampires, and especially the way that we get that story of the first brood from Makare and
Yeah.
Cayman and those old ones. I am so hopeful that we get all of that in this TV series. And the combination of, Claudia's voice in this episode and these hints with Rashid's character and everything that they're doing there makes me think that's where we're headed, folks. We're going to get some old ass vampires and we're going to get them pretty soon, I think.
I'm so excited. I really do. I really do want us to get to see that story. And I think a lot of us, hey, Joel, you already came around. I'm on board now. A lot of us have come around to the idea of the rock star version of Lestat. So I just say, let's give it to us. Let's do this. Let's do this.
I'm absolutely on board now. I've heard Sam sing. I've seen these two together. I've seen the way that music plays into the series. I think it's going to be beautiful,
Right.
especially if they've given us the story of Nicholas by that point. This beautiful, passionate, charismatic violinist, and the way that permanently scars Lestat. Yep. I want it. I want
Well, and
my
we
my
may get
rock
those
star
stories at the
Lestat. I
same
want it.
time. We may get that kind of, those stories might run in parallel. So there's so many, they can play with time in their storytelling however they want. I mean, they've set that up already, flashbacks, flash forwards, hopefully we don't go the lost way and have flash sideways, but I'll be along for the ride no matter what.
Yeah, we don't need alternate dimensions in this universe. Thank you very much.
No, I think we
Let's
have
have
enough to be going
one
on with.
one consistent timeline. Quite
Yeah.
so, quite so. Um, Quickly, Ashley, before we sign off today, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have found the show and shared the show. I've heard from a lot of people, oh, such and such gave it to me, or this person mentioned that they've been listening to an Anne Rice podcast, et cetera, et cetera. There are only a handful of shows now that are actually still in production about this show and this universe and these stories. We are very thankful to be among them. We're also very proud to say, I've checked this to be sure, we're the only show that is coming out on Sundays that is about the episode that has dropped that Sunday on AMC Plus. So if you're a streamer, we're the only place that you can go right away and get some
Hey,
feedback on what's going on.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
We are your
Well, and the
recap
other
show, y'all.
That's right, exactly. We're your recap show, and we're going to do the same thing when the Mayfair Witch series premieres, and whatever its spin-offs or just second seasons, we'll do the same as this universe moves forward. I do want to say again, thank you. The show's been a success too. We are. I shared this with you, Ashley, yesterday or the day before. We are consistently in the top 100 in after shows. Not only in the U.S., but in the U.K. and Australia and Italy and France and
So
Canada.
crazy.
Yeah, basically everywhere where you can get AMC reliably, I think those people are into it there. So
Thanks, you
thank you,
guys.
everybody who's listening. It's so much fun sharing this with you. It's so much fun hearing your feedback, and join the Facebook group if you want to talk to us more, or at least tweet us. I know some people are not on Facebook for, good, healthy reasons. If you'd like
Right,
to tweet us, you can
absolutely.
do that
Hello.
too. So yeah, tweet us at Unarticulate Coven. But tell us what you're thinking about the show. Tell us about your fan theories, and we'll be happy to share those or any news that crops up. You've already been a big help to our discussions moving
Oh
forward.
my gosh, yeah, absolutely.
Ashley, any final thoughts on this episode?
No, just it was exciting to kind of to get a taste of what seeing this show and the upcoming shows through different eyes and different voices is going to be like. I'm really, really pumped about that. I've got to be really honest. Like I'm just I'm excited to see. That's one of my favorite things about the books is just all the different seeing the stories from all the different perspectives. I like that kind of storytelling trope. So I'm just as always really excited to be along for this ride. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Me too. Me too. What comes next is episode 5, where we get,
Oh, we're halfway
I don't
done,
know,
you guys.
maybe a little murder mystery. That's kind of what the trailer was giving me, vibes of a little murder mystery almost, even though we know who committed the murders.
Right.
So I'm excited to see how the cop storyline plays out next week, as it looks like Claudia is going to get the family in a little bit of trouble.
Especially since we're not supposed to eat cops.
Right, right. You can't just eat all the cops, apparently. That's what daddies say. All right, folks, we'll be back next week to talk about episode 5 of Interview with the Vampire from Anne Rice and AMC's Immortal universe. Until then, we've been your hosts.
Ashley Wright Eiler.
I'm Joel Sharpton, and we are the Articulate Coven.
Thanks for listening to The Articulate Coven. You can join our community on Facebook by following the links in the show notes or searching for Articulate Coven on Facebook. You can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at articulatecoven.com. And share us with your Anne Rice loving friends.